What up, guys? Welcome to another night of streaming. Gonna go ahead and get everything set up here. So, super excited to have everybody here and to be able to share my new Warden tank build that I've been working on. It's about 97% complete, and that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about tonight and showing everybody. It's gonna be pretty exciting for me. Feel free to post up some comments in the chat, and I will read those and let you know. I should have answers to pretty much all of your questions about this build. Okay. Just getting all my comments stuff pulled up so that I can read anything that you guys write for me. All right. There we go. Alright, officially welcome to the stream. Tonight I'm going to be playing on my Argonian Warden, hunts with Daedra. He is pretty fantastic. This has actually been a really fun build to make. I'm just going to spend a couple minutes, go over some stats, armor, that kind of stuff to get you acquainted with him. So first off in stats, I did something a little bit out of the norm for tanks. He is completely in Magicka, so that's 64 points out of character stuff just dumped right into Magicka. The reasoning behind this is I noticed pretty much right off the bat that for whatever reason, being a Warden tank, you're just burning through Magicka. I mean, every ability except for your general taunt on your one-handed shield is based off of Magicka. And I mean, sure, I've played around with the stamina builds, but really if you want to use the Warden class to its fullest ability, which is going to give you amazing damage, amazing heals, amazing buffs, you really need to dig into that Magicka. On top of that, this also ups your DPS ability and your healing ability because your Magicka damage scales off of this. It scales off of those points right there. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about sets because, well, it's really absolutely essential. So we'll start with Head and Shoulders. So a lot of people are all over the Brass Fortress set, which is an amazing set, don't get me wrong. I love the set. It gives a lot of it gives a ton of passives. I mean, it absolutely gives a ton of passives. With primarily focused in the spell and physical resistance. Now you'll notice here that I'm racking almost 30k spell resistance and 27k physical resistance. And while that seems a little bit low for a tank, one of the skills I'm going to show you later really compensates for this. Now the other way that I'm compensating for the lack of fortified brass is I'm using the Pirate Skeleton's Visage, just the one-piece set, and you can see it adds almost 3k spell and physical resistance right off the bat. Next, I'm using Mighty Chudans, which is the other set that adds almost another 3k spell and physical resistance right off the bat. So those two together compensate for a huge chunk of what fortified brass offers. Now the reason I did this is because I wanted to be able to pick up the extra health that you pick up from Plague Doctors. So at all times I'm running a 5-piece Plague Doctor set. Now the reasoning behind this is, as you can see, I mean, it's about 6k extra health, which when you're tanking, you absolutely have to have health. There is no getting around it. There's no doing anything other than having that health available to yourself. The other set is a crafted set that I'm using. It is Torx Pact. This is kind of an essential set as a tank, so it's really nice for a Magicka based tank because you start off with more spell damage, more health, spell resistance, but decreasing the weapon enchantment cooldown and increasing the potency by 30% is absolutely massive as a tank, because you really want to have a crushing enchantment on at least one of your weapons, because the more you can lower the target's spell and physical resistance, the more damage your group can output and the less damage you have to tank, because, well, things die. Your job as the tank is to make sure that your group has the buffs they need, that you're taunting where needed, and that you're providing things like the crushing enchantment, where you're hitting things and creating this reduced target's physical and spell resistance. You'll notice on my ice staff, which is also Plague Doctor, I need to recharge this, but it reduces weapon and spell damage. So essentially between those two, I'm making it so that my group can output more DPS, and then I'm making it so that my healer has to do less work, because what we're fighting is not doing as much damage now. Granted, this is very much a boss-based idea of where you really want this to be effective and where you want this to be. With enchants on all of my gear. With enchantments on all of my gear, you're going to see I have maximum magicka on my helmet. I have stamina on the chest, stamina on the shoulder, stamina on the gloves, belt, boots, and on the pants. Sorry, I was being asked a question by my wife. Anyways, so with the stamina enchantments, the reason for this is because as a tank, I'm still using a sword and shield. I still have to be able to block and to have that available to myself when I'm playing. And so with this, you'll notice that over here my maximum stamina is 17k. And this is with a food buff. I mean, I'm running a tri-stat food. You can see I have 19 minutes left on it. It's increased all primary stats. I'm running the Withered Tree Inn Venison Pot Roast. It's kind of the best that I have to be able to run with. And it's a great tri-stat food. I mean, it's an absolutely awesome amount of health, magicka, and stamina. So back to this whole setup over here. I do have a maximum magicka enchantment on my shield, and the reasoning for this is for the finalized version of the build. I already talked about our crusher enchantment. On this weapon I also have infused, which is absolutely essential because infused increases the weapon enchantment effect and reduces the cooldown. So all of a sudden my ability to put down these debuffs, it's reapplying every time it drops, as long as I'm doing a light or a heavy attack in the right crucial moments. With all of that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into skills so you can kind of get a perspective on this. So this is my sword and shield bar that's up first. The finalized version of this build I'm planning on running Warhorn. As you can see, I'm a couple ranks short just because I've been out collecting Mage Guild books. This has been quite the adventure this week of getting Mage Guild 10 on this character because, like I said earlier, he was stamina based. Beginning of this week, end of last week, and so this has been quite a big change. So with these skills, on this bar I'm gonna have the Alliance Warhorn ability most of the time, which is going to be a great thing just to buff everybody. It's a great tank skill to have in general. This is going to give maximum magicka, maximum stamina, toughness. All of those things are just gonna, come as a result of this. It's a fantastic ability and I can't say enough good things about it. With this bar, the first skill up is our basic tank taunt. Sword and shield, pierce armor, moveset number 1 that shows up. This is going to do a little bit of physical damage, but the biggest thing is it taunts them to attack me for 15 seconds, and it inflicts major fracture, major breach. This is going to lower their physical and spell resistance. Kind of like what the crushing enchantment's doing, just added on top of that. So between the crushing enchantment and this right here, with my gear set up the way it is, I'm looking at an additional 7, almost 8k drop in their physical and spell resistance. If I remember right from some of the forums and stuff I've been reading, most PvE mobs that you're fighting are at about 18k, so all of a sudden that's dropping them down to 10k resistance, and then you factor in penetration from the group. Pretty much everybody runs around with about 8k penetration, so they have virtually no armor at this point. Next up is Ice Fortress. This is how I finish making up for not using things like Fortified Brass to up my own resistance. Ice Fortress increases my physical and spell resistance by 5,280 for 24 seconds, and then also gives me minor protection. That 8% damage reduction is absolutely massive. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this really quick. So you can see my spell resistance is 29k, my physical resistance is 27k. I'm going to go ahead and use this ability and open that back up. And you can see I've buffed out to 34k and 32k on my spell and physical resistance, which is absolutely huge. And in all honesty, is about all you want when it comes to a PvE build. You're not really dealing with anything that has crit potential or penetration. Looks like I have a question here from She Hooked about what CP I need for this build. So currently I am CP 384. I am building this build for 690, but I'm not quite there, so I can't really show its full potential there. I think if you fall into the range of 200 or so, it would be a pretty comfortable build to be able to run. You could run it with no CP, just PvE tanking. You're going to miss out on some of the buffs and things that I'm going to talk about in a little bit when I go over the champion points, but it's doable. It's a pretty solid build. Moving forward in the skills, Lotus Blossom is another Warden ability. It comes right out of the Green Balance Tree. This ability is fantastic, especially if you are doing ESO weaving, where you are animation canceling your light attacks. If you're doing that, you're restoring almost 1.5k health every single time you attack, which is huge. It's absolutely massive. On top of that, you're getting Major Prophecy, which is increasing your spell critical. The next thing that I absolutely recommend if you are in a group dynamic is Leeching Vines. This skill with the passives that come through the green balance tree restores an incredible amount of health for you and for everyone in your group. So what this does is you want it applied to you as the tank because you're going to be taunting things, which means things are going to attack you. And when they attack you, it applies minor lifesteal to that enemy for 10 seconds. Every time you or your allies damage that target, you are healed for 654 health. Now this is going to happen every 1 second, but when you think about a group dynamic and how much DPS is coming out and how many things are attacking the tank, especially if you can get multiple things taunted onto you, you're talking about 4 or 5k heals per second that can be coming out of this skill. It's a massive amount. On top of that, you're going to be restoring magicka and stamina to yourself because you're healing an ally with this ability. The next big thing to talk about comes from the Animal Companions tree. It's the Blue Betty. You can't have a magicka build without Blue Betty. You're going to restore magicka over time, and while 4k doesn't seem like a lot, it really can be, and it accomplishes a lot for you as a player. And there's times where you're going to run out of magicka. It's just going to happen, even with a ridiculous amount of magicka and magicka recovery. It's just going to happen. While it's active, it also removes one negative effect from you, which as a tank, I can't emphasize enough how much it sucks to have a stupid amount of degeneration on you and to have your healer busy taking care of someone else and having to heal yourself through it. This compensates. The next big thing that this ability offers you is major sorcery. As long as you have this up and you really want to reapply it every time it goes down, you're going to have major sorcery, which is an extra 20% to your spell damage, which comes in huge for you on this next bar. I'll go over ultimates here in a minute. On the next bar, we're using Screaming Cliff Racer. It's a Cliff Racer. I mean, it does an extra 15% damage. The reasoning behind using this ability, though, is the magicka cost is pretty low. It's only 2k. But due to Bond with Nature, every time you cast this ability, you will restore health to yourself. This is a spammable ability to deal damage and heal yourself at the same time. Next up on the list is another Warden ability. It comes from Winter's Embrace. It's Shimmering Shield. This is great if you're fighting a boss that does ranged attacks, or if you are about to charge into a mob that has archers, sorcerers, healers, any of that, because you're going to be attracting projectile damage. This ability will shield you for a pretty huge chunk of that, and on top of it, it's going to restore your magicka, which, like I've already said, is kind of a big deal for you. And then it's also going to give you major heroism. And this is going to restore 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 6 seconds. And that's every time this shield goes off. This major heroism is huge because it lets us be able to get off our ultimates more frequently and more often. The next thing, I'm almost to the morph on this. I've been working on this build. I'm using Impulse. When we morph this skill, we're going to be going to Elemental Ring as... Is it? I'm sorry. Correction there. We're going to be going to Pulsar. The biggest thing here is you're going to do damage in AoE form where you're at, which is really huge for you. I mean, you're the tank. You're going to be in the middle of everything. Your job is to run in first, to taunt things, to put down all these buffs, and then all of a sudden you're in the middle of this huge mob, and I don't know, I've always thought it would be really nice to be able to kill some stuff too. It's kind of the point of the game. Be able to kill stuff, get to the next thing. With Pulsar, you're gonna deal damage to everything around you. 2,311 damage to everything. On top of that, you're going to reduce everything's maximum health by 10% for 30 seconds. I would even use this ability in a boss fight just to affect the boss with minor mangle. That's the level to which I would recommend this ability. Up next, I've been playing with using Force Pulse, which does a great amount of damage, and it'll damage 2 other enemies nearby as long as they're burning, chilled, or concussed, which, if you have a sorcerer in your group, you're pretty much guaranteed that they're going to be concussed. But you, as a warden, are applying the chilled effect to everything. Just to kind of show you here, one of the passives, right here, passive number 1 in Winter's Embrace, Glacial Presence, increase the chance of applying chilled to enemies with Winter Embrace abilities by 200%. Right now we're using Northern Storm. When you drop Northern Storm, everything becomes chilled, which means everything is vulnerable to this. On top of that, we have Elemental Blockade. Elemental Blockade with a Frost Staff, you're reducing their movement speed and you immobilize chilled targets. You can also apply chill just because you have a Frost Staff. Moving on to the Frost Staff itself, the reason why you use a Frost Staff is just because Frost Staffs put down a taunt, and it's a very minor shield, but it's a shield nonetheless. So every time you heavy attack, you're going to taunt your enemies, and you're going to give yourself just a little bit of a shield. I mean, that's 2k damage that you and your healer don't have to heal. And there's a ton of great passives here. The next thing is ultimates, the biggest grind of the week, getting Meteor. So the more fun Meteor, we're going to be going to Ice Comet. I'm sorry, correction, Shooting Star. I don't know why I said Ice Comet. It sounded cooler, you know, as an Ice Warden, it just sounds cool to say Ice Comet. So Shooting Star, the biggest reason for that is that you're going to generate 9 ultimate for every enemy hit. So this is really what you want to drop in a giant mob, because if you can hit 10 things with it, that's 90 ultimate regeneration right there, which almost gives you another cast for free. The other skill option that I would put in here in place of Force Pulsar that I've been playing with is Structured Entropy. The reasoning for this is you get major sorcery from this, but that's a buff that we're already picking up. The biggest thing though is it gives you a little bit of healing, but it also gives you an extra 7% maximum health. And the biggest issue with that is you create a disparity between your 2 bars. The reason why the biggest way that you could fix that is just to put a health rune right here. It'll lower the gap. I mean, you'll go down to about a 600 health difference. So that's kind of the general side of the build, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about champion points, and then I'm going to show you how the build works. So I'm gonna go ahead and start in the steed, and I'll work my way around the champion point circle. So right now I have 23 points put in Ironclad. This is just purely damage reduction, and then I have a little bit put into Spell Shield. You really don't need much here just because your spell resistance is already higher. This was mostly put there just to give a couple extra points here, and because the percentages in champion points work in a really weird way where if you're at 10.6%, it counts the same as 10%. And so you always want to go to the rounded number in your champion points. In the next tree in the lady, we have Hardy, just a great reduction for physical, poison, disease, damage. Straightforward, you're just reducing damage coming in, which as a tank, you're taking a lot of it. Elemental Defender, once again, reduce the damage coming in from Flame, Frost, Shock, Magicka damage. This is, again, just trying to reduce your damage as a tank. And then reduction of damage from overtime effects. This is going to be things like poison injection, elemental blockade, I believe still qualifies as an overtime effect. These are all things that are just going to continue giving you damage, but you're getting a reduction here. I mean, 5% doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about multiple thousands, it starts adding up pretty quickly. Moving over to the Lord, we have Expert Defender. This reduces your damage taken from light and heavy attacks. Heavy armor focus. This is where you're picking up your physical resistance. This is where you start closing that gap that you have between your physical and spell resistance to get it more balanced. That's why you can see, I mean, there's 16 points put in here. Then the next one is Quick Recovery. It increases your healing received. I can't emphasize enough how big this is for you. You do a lot of healing yourself, and that healing that you do that affects yourself is also amplified by this, and then all of the healing done by your healer is amplified by this. Both of these effects are going to, both of those sides of this effect are really going to help you as the tank to be able to survive. The way that I have it set up right now also unlocks a bunch or two passives right here. So while you're resurrecting a player, your damage taken is reduced by 15%. I can't tell you how often I've seen a group wipe because the last person left up tried to res once everyone was down and just died. And I mean, it's at that point it is what it is, but if you have a 15% reduction in damage on top of all of the other reduction that we already have as a tank, you have a pretty good shot of being able to make it through it, especially if you have all of your buffs up and everything else that you're trying to work with. The next thing is Infusion. When you resurrect another player, you increase their Magicka recovery for 8 seconds. If your healer's down and you res them and you give them that Magicka recovery, they may not notice it. They may not, you know, have any particular interest in it, but I can tell you that it will have a huge effect, especially if your group is borderline wiping as it is. Since I missed those earlier, Bulwark, it adds, while you have a shield or frost staff equipped, your spell and physical resistance is increased. It's just a little thing, but when you're using a sword, shield, and a frost staff, you're upping your resistance. And then spell absorption, when you take flame, shock, or magicka damage, or oblivion damage, equal to 30% of your max health, you restore magicka. And that effect can occur every 10 seconds. As a tank, you're going to be taking all of that kind of damage, and sometimes it will be 30% of your health. And when that happens, you're usually low on magicka and you need the magicka. And then bash, you have a 20% chance to heal when you bash. That's something that I need to work on, but it is a fantastic thing to use. Moving on into the tower, we have Warlord, which reduces break free cost. This is when you're stunned or feared, you need to burn through stamina. Since this build is fairly low stamina, these are things that we want to put champion points into to work with that reduced cost. Bashing focus, reduce the cost of bash, which kind of plays in with the last passive that I was talking about, which was invigorating bash. And then With the passives in this, right now I have Ensnare opened. When you use Bash, you have a 33% chance to reduce the enemy's movement speed by 20% for 3 seconds. As a tank, it's really nice to immobilize things and reduce movement speed because it slows it down enough so that you can taunt it and keep it away from your group. Trust me, the squishy DPS will thank you. I play a squishy DPS at other times, and I'm always grateful when we have a good tank who keeps things off of me. Next up, coming up in the Lover, we have Tenacity, increases Magicka and Stamina. Your fully charged heavy attacks heal. Restore. Arcanist, which is Magicka recovery. Mooncalf, which is stamina, and then your health recovery. Arcanist is probably the biggest one here, and I'll tell you, dump points into Arcanist. You can't really have enough Magicka recovery in this build. From what you have already seen in the skills, there's a lot of Magicka that gets used. And then the last area is Shadow Ward. So this is to reduce the cost of blocking, which will save you. When you block, you're not restoring anything. So your Magicka restoration cuts off, your stamina restoration, your health restoration, everything. It just cuts off while you're in block. And there's times where you're just going to sit there and block and take it. And you have to have a reduction there. I mean, there's no way to get around that. The other one is reduction in roll dodge. And roll dodge is invaluable, especially when you see that red circle starting around the boss and you just need to get out of there. This also opened up a bunch of great passives for just getting things from chests, repairing your gear, finding stuff in general. I mean, it's good for PvE content. Moving forward into the Apprentice, we have Blessed, which increased your healing done. So this will stack with increasing your healing received. These two stack on each other if you're healing yourself, which is awesome for you because if you're healing yourself, you need it. So Elfborn increases the damage and healing of your critical strikes. So you can critically heal, you can critically damage. Having an 11% increase on that, on top of the already increase of critical damage in general, is absolutely massive. Elemental Expert, increase your Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magicka damage done by 10.15%. Anyways, that 10% is going into your Shock. Or not your Shock, your Frost. You are going to cast a ton of Frost spells. You are Warden. Wardens use Ice. This also gives us Foresight. When you drink a potion, you reduce the cost of your next Magicka ability. As in Argonian, drinking potions is just part of gameplay. I mean, you use them all the time because there's a ton of passives for you as an Argonian. You're restoring some of everything just drinking a regular potion. You could drink a Magicka damage potion and restore health, Magicka, and stamina. Spell critical is increased by 12%. Vengeance, when you block 3 spells within 10 seconds of each other, your next Magicka ability used within 5 seconds will always be a critical strike. Just nice things to have. Staff Expert, increasing your damage done with your light and heavy attacks with destruction staffs. It's pretty straightforward. Retaliation, when you block heavy attacks, your next light attack used within 7 seconds deals an additional 30% damage. Like I said earlier, you're going to be blocking a lot. You're going to be weaving light attacks in with everything, and this is going to initiate this retaliation. It's a little bit of extra damage. And then the last thing that I've invested in is Thaumaturge, which is just in increasing your damage done with overtime effects. So let me go ahead and just run out. I'm here at Vex City, and I'm just going to show you a general little fight type thing. I don't have a food buff on right now, so I'll do it with and without the food buff so that you can get a feel for how much damage this build outputs, what it looks like. I think there's a troll that hangs out over here, and that's probably going to be where I'm heading. Yep, he's right there. Alright, so before I even go into combat, I drop the skills on this bar. This just gives me my regeneration, a little bit of healing for myself, a little bit of damage negation, and now I'm going to go in. And I mean, this is going to be a really quick, I'm going to hit, pierce, and since I waited a little bit, I'm going to reapply all these because you really don't want them to run out. You have all of these abilities at your disposal. I'm going to go ahead and use my Mage Guild ability just because I'm a super big fan of this ability right now. You want to go ahead and keep all of your buffs, debuffs, passives, all of it down. As you can see, the troll is dead. We had, it looks like, just over 4k DPS in that fight, and about 1,500 heals per second. This isn't the highest I've seen, it also isn't the lowest. It just kind of depends on the fight. That was kind of just a really quick demonstration. You'll see Lotus Blossom, Bond with Nature were the two biggest heals. Bond with Nature is that Warden passive that's coming from your animal creatures being unsummoned. The next thing is damage caused. You can see light attack was my #1 thing. The reason why I was getting so many light attacks in is that weaving. I'm hitting a light attack, hitting my skill. And that's just causing me to be able to get more damage in general. Meteor, which was my Mage Guild ability, Blockade of Frost, that overtime damage, and then Screaming Cliff Racer, which was also healing me. So that was without a food buff. Let me go ahead and pop a food buff on, and we'll go do something else around here that's probably not too difficult. And then we'll go ahead and queue for a random normal dungeon and just show you guys a full dungeon with this tank and what it can accomplish. Of course, when I want to show things off and I go looking for things, it's always that moment where I'm never finding anything. Alright, so you can see I'm putting down all my buffs. Light attack, I'm doing my pierce. Block that. I'm gonna use my Cliff Racer. Now, I kind of messed up a little bit there. I should have put down my Blockade of Frost first. I mean, that should have been right after I did Pierce Armor. I should have dropped that. Just because I missed out on a little bit of damage over that period of time. But you can see, even so, I had a bunch of healing going on. I had a bunch of different things where my damage was coming in. I came in at almost 2k heals just in general going. Oh, hey, Columbine, that's always an exciting thing to find. So, I'm going to go ahead and queue us for a random normal dungeon. I'm not going to go veteran just because this build isn't quite 100% done. This is just the first draft, if you will. Sometimes things sneak up on you and that happens. Just get some damage down, keep going. And there's my queue for a random normal. I'll probably have this build posted with details on my website in the next month or so. I'll also have some updates coming out. You can find them on Instagram. I'll be streaming some of this stuff again too. It's all good things to have. I'll probably run some veteran dungeons with this build in the near future once I have it completely written out and done for you guys to be able to emulate and enjoy. So Spindle Clutch 1 is our dungeon of choice for the evening. Alright, and everybody's already up here. So I am the top level in this dungeon, which isn't totally abnormal. I I'm a champion flanking character running Spindle Clutch 1. So I don't tend to taunt everything that we fight in a dungeon. And this is just general good practice because things just die too quickly. I mean, if it's big, taunt it. Absolutely taunt it. I mean, make it suffer a lot. But these little spiders, it's just not worth it. It's a lot of extra time that I could spend doing things like Force Pulse, where I'm putting down extra DPS for my group. Alright, going to grab our buffs again. Alright, now we're going to use the Storm ability. Make sure the boss knows that we're here. Give him a little bit of the rough side of life. We're going to finish off these spiders and then just start working our way through them. I mean, we have buffs coming down. Reapply, and I mean, you can already see why I'm saying Magicka is a big deal. I'm running the Mundus Stone for Magicka Recovery on this character already, and I'm running Magicka Recovery glyphs on my jewelry. So you can already see that Magicka Recovery is a huge thing for this build. It's probably the one biggest flaw, but Magicka comes back quick enough that it's never really an issue. Alright. So we're not doing too bad as a group here. Looks like group DPS is in about 30k. And as a tank, it looks like we're putting in about 25% of the DPS, which is actually pretty high as a tank, which is one of the things that I absolutely love about this build, and something that I've been trying to get in a tank build. You guys will get to see my Nightblade healer at some point, I'm sure, and you'll notice with her right off the bat, half the build is built around the idea that things are supposed to die. The quicker things die, the less work I have as a tank or a healer. The quicker we get through dungeons. I mean, yeah, the game is about enjoying it. For some people, just fighting the dungeon, doing the thing, is enough. For others, you know, you want to be satisfied killing things. You want to know that you put in your part on the team. And for me, I've always felt like you're underutilizing a character if you have a character who can put down all of the buffs you need and then still be able to DPS. I mean, why do we need an entire character built around the idea of just being there to take damage? Granted, there are some dungeons where there's a lot of incoming damage. In my theory, you can minimize that by having more outgoing. Obviously, in a veteran dungeon group, I would not have somewhere in the 20% range on DPS. I mean, I've been in the veteran dungeon groups and we'll crank out 100k DPS. That being said, at 690, this build's also going to crank out more DPS. We gonna open? Okay, there we go. Alright, so right up here we have a boss fight with the Widow, and I'm going to make sure that she's taunted right off the bat. I don't want to be dealing with her taking out my healer halfway through the fight. I mean, this really isn't a bad fight, but it's understanding the dungeon that you're in and what you're trying to accomplish. And you can see that was 7k DPS for that fight, which totally isn't bad. Oh yeah, chest. That's always exciting. Looks like they went and pulled into the next group. And I just got attacked. So you'll remember that that ability does more damage based on distance. When you're just dealing with little stuff, that's not such a big deal. Let's go ahead and just tell them that I have a chest right here.
Come to me and to my web. Join me forever.
So this dungeon's always kind of bothered me, just with all the creepy voices in the background. I mean, really? Yeah, not too interested in either of those. I always love getting into groups with level 16s. I feel like it contributes to groups of lower level players. I mean, they probably have a 690 on their back bar, but I'm gonna bait rip it. Get more things in my... So... just the general outline with this build. I mean, it's a ton of fun. It's something that I've been working on for about a week now. Warden tanking though is an absolutely awesome thing to use. It's one of the most multifaceted classes in the game, in my opinion. I mean, sure, as a Night Blade, you can do everything. You can fill every role. I mean, if you want to be a tank, you can be a tank. If you want to be a healer, you can be a healer. It's one of the big things with Elder Scrolls games in general. You can be anything you want to be, but sometimes skill classes are just more designed for it. And with Wardens, I think that they have one of the best all-around style classes. I mean, okay, so I do turn around when I cast the Reaching Vines ability, and there's an entire reason for that. I at one point removed it completely from my bar. You'll notice that I just cast it, and the person that ended up on was not. It is by far the most frustrating thing about the ability. You can be in the middle of a boss fight, the boss is taunted on you, and you can't get the ability cast on yourself. What it does is it targets the party member with the lowest health. And while that doesn't sound like a bad idea, because it does put down a little bit of healing, It puts down a lot more if you can get that thing to damage whoever has the leeching bind on. Just because of that higher lifesteal. It's huge. And so I found if I turn around, just because of the directional style of ability, it actually it actually increases the healing done, just because I'm able to get it cast on myself every single time. So that's kind of a word to the wise for you. Alright, so single target, we came in at about 4k DPS, and we had just over 2k heals. I've seen it go a little bit higher, I've seen it go a little bit lower. So it's a lot of fun. You can see it went through really quickly. I don't have a ton of passives, or I don't have everything maxed out to have every passive available to me. So that will change things a little bit. I mean, you can see in the last week I've only managed to get myself up to level 43 Destruction Staff. I'm missing out on 2 passives right off the bat there. Impulse, I don't quite have it moved over. I'm just shy on that morph. So more to come with this build, kind of showing how it works, what it does, what it doesn't do, and giving you a better idea on if you want to start Warden tanking. I mean, it's nope, don't. Can I? Yes, there was a heavy sack. All right. So I hope that you have enjoyed watching and learning a little bit about my Warden tank. He is a ton of fun to play, and feel free to, you know, ask me some questions about him and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening.